Yeah, so hello everyone. Welcome to this very special live broadcast. And today we are joined by a guest uh, whose work is essential for anyone trying to understand the deeper currents of our changing world. I'm deeply honored and grateful to welcome Sandew Hira. Sandew is an independent scholar, activist, and one of the world's leading decolonial thinkers. He's the director of the International Institute of Scientific Research and and the secretary of Decolonial International Network Foundation. He has authored over 25 books on various topics with a deep focus on colonial history. And his most recent landmark book is titled of uh, Decolonizing the Mind, a guide to um, decolonial theory and practice. So I have already added the links to his website and YouTube channel in the description. I highly encourage you guys to check out, and I hope you find our conversation valuable. So uh, please remember to like the stream and subscribe to our channel, so you don't miss the um, future videos. Yeah. So Sandew, thank you for being here. Your expertise is in analyzing the global power structure is exactly what we need to move beyond the headlines and understand the real shifts happening today. Uh, and to be honest, we are very lucky to have you and your time on this.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let me start with my first question. It's basically now people around the world are seeing Ukraine, the Middle East, China, and the Indo Pacific as a separate conflict. But today we see like Iranian drones into Russian, and then those drones used in Ukraine, and Ukraine drones uh, uh, are targeting deep into Russian infrastructure. Then also recently we see Ukrainian drone targeted an Iranian vessel in Caspian Sea. And then the growing cooperation between different powers with sharing the military equipments for, like we know, recently China have uh, supplied is being supplying kind of new weapons to Iran. Then we see US and NATO already supplying weapons to Ukraine. And so the basic reality, I mean, logic, like, are these regional conflicts or are they becoming one larger global geopolitical story?
Sorry, apology. Um, yeah, well, if you look at the current conflicts in the world and you follow the daily news, your guideline is the incident. Today, Trump, who had pledged to bomb Iran energy infrastructure, withdrew it and said, no, we're not going to do it. And you try to understand why did he do. And then you can see, oh, the Iranians threatened to take down all the oil and gas installations and create a world economic problem, which is beyond the imagination of Trump. So Trump backed down, right? So that is how you analyze the incident. You look at the incident. Take, for example, in Spain, in Quetta, thousands, tens of thousands of Moroccans cross swimming to the enclave, Spanish enclave, occupied country in Morocco, and then you see it as an incident. You say, okay, why did they do it? And but when I analyze geopolitics, I don't look at it as a list of incidents. Now you have the drone that Iran has provided since the start of the war to Russia and licensed its technology there. That's an incident. You see China providing air defense systems for Iran. You see the incident, right? And then you wonder, what does it mean? Oh, they are supporting Iran, and then you try to get a view of, okay, where is the conflict going? Who's going to win? Is the US going to win? Is Israel? That is on your mind if you analyze the world as a series of incidents. When you analyze the world from a theoretical point of view, and my theoretical frame is decolonizing the mind, how did the world colonize the colonial power, colonize the mind and colonize the institutions, economic, social, political institutions, and then you figure out what does that has to do with all these incidents. And here's my analysis. In the world as we know now came into existence with colonization. The world before colonization was a collection of independent regional powers and regional structures which were not connected to each other. So you had in Abya, which is known as Latin America of the Americas, was not connected to India, neither to Iran. Nothing was right. So that's the world that came into existence, starting with 1492, the Spanish occupation, gradually building uh, imperial power Philippines. Portugal, colonized not only Brazil, they also colonized Africa. And that goes for how the world became interconnected through a system that we call colonialism. And colonialism has four dimensions: economic, political, social, and cultural, and obviously the geographical component. Now, that type of societies that connected each other, we know that the term for it is civilization. A civilization is a collection of society based on a certain knowledge basis. For example, the Hindu civilization was based on this knowledge base of Hinduism, the Chinese civilization of the Chinese philosophers, Islamic, etc. The foundation which rules the world now, in the first 150 years, from say 1500 to 1650, it was based on Christian theology. And then from 1650 onwards, you get so called science, Western sciences. They developed the ideas that are now prevalent in the world. How should your economy look like? Like a capitalist economy. Private enterprises, exploiting labor, etc. How should your political institutions look like? Oh, parliamentary democracy with political parties, etc. How should your cultural institutions look like? Oh, you have institutions of higher education that produces knowledge, etc. Right? How is your social institution also based on race and ethnicity? You see? So this was there, put into place for 350 years based on this new Enlightenment philosophy ideas. The, the political and military power of that civilization shifted. It started with Spain, then with Portugal, then with the Dutch. The Dutch and Belgium were at that time one country. Then with France, and then with England. England controlled the largest empire in the world, right? And only the last 70 years is the United States that controls the world. Now, in the mind of many people looking at today, they think the United States have been doing this the whole, you know, during the whole history. Trump thinks so. When Trump talks, that never in the history of the world was this or that not done. He did it, you know. So that's in the mind of people. So when we study all these successions, starting with Spain, when you were living in, let's say, in Mexico in 1600, you would think that Spain is the main imperial power. You would never think that someday you wouldn't even know the name of the Spanish queen king. Now you would know it's not a common name. You know, and that is how power has been losing. And what we see now in the world is that the American power and the civilization of the West is at stake. That is where they are losing, right? And what's happening is that the three powers leading this is China, Iran, and Russia. They are leading a fight for a resurgence of a new type of civilization. That you have to understand. And now, what's important is to understand that the leadership in these countries think like that. They don't think as if it's just a matter of military power of the United States versus Russia. Study Putin, study the thinkers around Putin. They are talking about the Russian civilization. Study Xi Jinping. He's talking about resurgence of Chinese civilization. Even in India, although India doesn't have the same kind of military and cultural and economic power as China has, but in India, which in the future might play a bigger role, it's a civilizational discourse that the BGP is taking on. And take Iran, it always talk about a 7,000 year civilization, not 1,400 years, not just Islam. You see? So, in the mindset of these people who are fighting Western civilization, not American power, Western civilization, it is about how do we destroy the power that has colonized the world. And that is what connects Ukraine, China, and Iran, but also connects Venezuela and Cuba. You see? It's all interconnected now. So what you see, the struggle what's happening now in the military struggle, is something you have to understand in political terms. This German general von Clausewitz wrote a book on war in the 19th century, and he said that war is a continuation of politics with other means. Meaning, if you want to understand why is Iran or why is Trump bombing or not bombing, or what, that you can only understand if you think political. And the political thing is this. Take Iran's strategy. What is Iran's strategy in the confrontation with the US? Study Ali Khamenei, his works. He has a website in English. It's about removing the US military bases from, they don't call it Middle East because Middle East takes Europe as a reference. They call it Western Asia, where they take Asia as a reference. So now, if you remove the military bases in Western Asia, what do you achieve? You achieve that you basically demilitarize the Gulf regimes. And the next step is it will lead to the war with Israel that destroys Israel. So you have to understand that this is the long-term thing in Iran. Getting rid of the US, getting rid of the apartheid state of Israel. And who are supporting them? Who are supporting Israel? These are not just the Arab regimes. Mind you, There was a war, 8 year war between Iran and Iraq, and in that war, Iraq was supported not only by the Western power but also by China and Russia. We have a new different situation now. You see, so what does it mean? It means that the Iranians are always looking at it politically. How can we make sure that the Arab family dictatorship understands that the future doesn't lie with US protection anymore? And what we are going to see here is probably a political shift from the Gulf states, who has to now consider, is it worth allying ourselves with the US, or is it worth allying ourselves with China? And China is heavily investing economically in Western Asia. You know, they are building Belt and Road Initiative in the whole region. And if they take that route, obviously they will go against the masters of the US empire. So the whole game in Western Asia for Iran is how to detach this corrupt family dictatorships from the US, which they don't want to detach from, and they want to align with Iran. So these people have a very difficult choice to make. And they could go to a suicidal mission by allowing the continuation of this war, which might risk destruction of the economy and therefore destruction of the regimes. So when you look at all the incidents that are now taking place, and you look at it from this context which I just outlined, it would be easier to understand what is happening there and what is happening there.
Okay. My next question is about what you call the 70, 80 years of Western dominance. So the world has largely operated under a US-led international system, and it's still that way. But do you believe, and in what sense, is that system changing? And if it's changing, and how fast is it? And what are the biggest signs that tells us that a new international order is imminent and emerging?
Okay, let's take some historical context. If you were living in 1914 in the world, you had the Ottoman Empire, you had the Russian Empire, you had the German Habsburger Empire. Within 4 years, when the war started, they disappeared. The Russian Revolution founded the first socialist revolution. The Ottoman Empire collapsed, and you get Republic of Turkey, and the Habsburg Empire dissolved, and you get Austria and Germany as so-called liberal democratic states. It was in 4 year times. In 1939, India was under the rule of the British. The whole of Africa were under the rule of the British. China, suffered from Japanese imperialism. 1948, 1946, Indonesia was under the control of the Dutch. Within a decade, all these countries became politically independent. And in 1966, in 1 year, a lot of those African countries became politically independent. So, what do you see is that war is an engine of change, and an engine of very fast changes. So now we have a war that uh, goes on and off now. right? So they started with the bombing in in June last year, and then February they started this, and it's on and on going on and off. And when the MOU was signed, I was a bit optimistic, thinking that the US empire had already caved in. And I thought, okay, this is already happening. But that was not the case. Trump restarted the war. But we are now again at a point where Trump has to consider, uh, and within his administration, his own government, there's opposition and continuation of the war, you know. So the question is, what will he do? Will he go back to the MOU? Even if it's not now, the historical thing is that the the forces are pushing him out of the region. It is that the Gulf countries and Pakistan and Turkey and all these things, all these countries which were basically allies of the US, are now considering what are the alternatives. And one alternative is a new security architecture for the whole region that ensures the security of Lebanon and Palestine. So, but this family dictatorship don't like that. They don't see Israel disappearing. And that's why initially they went into the Abraham Accords that ensured the existence of Israel, the Zionist apartheid state of Israel. So I think that the question of what kind of security architecture might come into place will in replacing the US empire. I think that will be the a kind of mid stage to a final solution, and the final solution is basically the destruction of the apartheid states of Israel. That's the final thing. And you have to remind yourself that that is where this is going. But the Chinese and the Russians and all these countries are not there yet. They are not there at the point of saying, okay, they are at the point of saying, let's separate West from Western Asia, but they are not there to say, and the next step is let's get rid of the apartheid state of Israel. So the Iranians have a lot of work to do to convince these guys that that's where you should go. And the instrument is a military victory. And with the military victory come the economic power. Because in the MOU, the Strait of Hormuz was under the control of Iran and joined with Oman. The reparations that they demanded would be paid by the Gulf states. The returning of all the billions that the American has taken. So let's say economically, if the war stops, um, and the United States would accept, I don't think they will accept it easily, but they accept basics of the MOU, then we could see a world changing in very fast terms. You see?
Uh, so we know um, can you just mute your because my sound is echoing while
Oh, okay.
yeah. So we know that Israel and US started the war on Iran with having an agenda of regime change. Then they said uh, the nuclear issue. Then they also said um, 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 ending the support of Iranian of their axis of resistance in Yemen, Iraq, and yes beyond. But what we saw since the war started uh, in Ramzan, the day they attacked uh, on the leader of Iran, also the leader of uh, of Shia Muslim around the world, and basically they wanted to just have a regime change, take over the country, and Trump also mentioned to take the island of Kharg Island, which is rich in oil and other places where they can benefit with. But what we have seen uh, after the funeral ceremony of Ali Khamenei, that people of Iran have emerged. We have reports about 4 million people, 40 million people, sorry, were on streets supporting uh, uh, and yeah, chanting out against Iran, sorry, US and Israel. And right now, we see escalation from both sides. Iran um, surprisingly attacked Jordan a few days ago while the Israeli Prime Minister was in US. And the next day, we also saw a surprising um, news that the peace in peace board of peace in Gaza, they are moving forward with disarmament of Hamas and Israeli withdraw from Gaza. So when they started all this with the agenda of making these changes in Iran and um, Israel to take over Gaza, and so because you have the background in occupational powers, and now we see the Strait of Hormuz, where Iran want to take the grip and don't want to lose it for any time future. And they clearly say that there is no other way to pass any ship apart from the Iranian control. So, what do you think? Like the U.S. position and the Israeli position is right now, because uh, they don't talk about the nuclear missiles and other support of resistance in the region, but now it comes to the Strait of Hormuz for Iran, and they also had Yemen Houthis attacking Saudi, so it's also a very kind of great escalation and a choke point where many of the uh, global's energy market is choked. And we are seeing more actions about where it's leading. Obviously, it can be escalation, but there were attacks on Iran again um, while negotiations were carrying out, and we see other other events also happening, like daily strikes on uh, Gaza civilians. The genocide continues, and yes, the major global, I can say, interest, or I can say the news outlets around the world are focusing mostly on Iran. But the background, these events are shaping uh, the U.S. and Israeli position in the region. And so, I just want to know from your side, like uh, what could be the position that currently the U.S. and Israeli officials uh, are experiencing, and how would they possibly um, react to any further escalation or events happening in the region? Yes.
Well, I suggest that you look up a video on YouTube by General Wesley Clark, and he spoke after uh, 9/11 when they start attacking Afghanistan. He came out with a plan where the United States policymakers, and that was not in the time of Trump. So don't think that American policy is just Trump. American policy is made by a bunch of people, statutory people from both the Democratic and the Republican Party, on how to rule the world. So they came out with a plan to take out seven countries in 7 years. And 7 years, they meant uh, Syria, Iraq, Libya, some other countries, and it ended with Iran. So, in their mindset, they think that by regime change in all these countries, they would perpetuate US empire for eternity. So, they started this campaign in Iraq, the invasion of Iraq, and they took out Saddam Hussein. But it didn't go according to plan because instead of Saddam Hussein, you get now a fractured power system in which large parts of the power structure in Iraq are still aligned with Iran. So that plan didn't work. They managed to take out Syria, they managed to take out Gaddafi, but Iran is a different ball game. Iran is a popular revolution, meaning that the 1979 revolution was a massive popular uprising against the Shah, who was a Western stooge. So they thought that within the Iranian population, like in any other population, it's not monolithic. So you have different views. And politically, these views converge around two kind of political streams, one called the principalists and the other called the reformists. The reformers trying to reform the Islamic system, and the principalists trying to maintain the Islamic system. And the reformers were seen as people who were, inclined to make a deal with the West in terms of rapprochement and etc. That whole thing fell flat because the funerals of first of General Soleimani where millions took the place, but now with Ali Khamenei, uh, where tens of millions people across Iran and Iraq, which is important, Iraq, you know. Uh, so that revolution has a firm popular support. Regime change is a fantasy. Looking at the reality on the ground, there will be no regime change in Iran soon. In fact, the war has solidified the unity within Iran on fighting US imperialism. There are no reformers in public now arguing to make a deal with the US because they understand that US doesn't respect any deal. So it is military power that will force the US out of Western Asia. So the policy of regime change, which they really put emphasis on the Mossad and CIA in January, had all the people on the ground in Iran in January, to engineer a kind of regime change. It didn't work because the revolution has popular support. And in the Western media, they never tell you that this revolution in Iran has a popular support, you know. So I guess that once you understand that it's different from Syria or Libya, then you understand that the United States and Israel have made a fatal mistake by going into the war with Iran and thus unleashing things they would never have imagined. First of all, is that Iran would bomb the Gulf state, that Iran would dare attack American military installations in the Gulf state, that Iran would bomb Israel. because they thought that the nuclear threat that the US and Israel could use atomic bomb to wipe out Iran, and therefore, because of that threat, Iran wouldn't strike either the American military bases, the Gulf states, or Israel. It has shown that that threat didn't work. And now the Iranians have said, you know what will happen if you throw a nuclear bomb? The military guy said, you know what the first thing we'll do? We'll bomb the nuclear reactor in Israel, in the Najaf uh, uh, um, area, the Dimona nuclear reactor. And that will have the same effect as a nuclear bomb. So uh, you could, Iran is a huge place. It's not a small country. Israel is a small country. So you could put an atomic bomb in Tehran and you kill 1 million people or more, they would be able to bomb the nuclear reactor in Dimona and have the same effect as a nuclear bomb. So that's why they are very careful with this threat of nuclear bombing. And then the other thing to remember is that this war produced the Strait of Hormuz as now an economic powerhouse for Iran. It wasn't there before the war. Before not this war, even the previous war when they bombed Israel. In this war, the first time is that they bombed the Gulf states relentlessly. It wasn't there before. So that's why I'm telling you we are going into qualitative different phases. It's not just a bombing of a country. It is the process of removing American military power of Western Asia. And the next step is removing the apartheid states from Israel from the map. That is what's going on.
So, from what we are currently seeing in the news, like Trump says Iran is begging for a deal, and he continues to say Iran can never have a nuclear weapon, and we won't allow to to do that. And Israel also supports that about the nuclear weapons they have, and Iran has already had inspections of IAEA into the country, and it clearly says it's building the nuclear for civilian purpose. But because what the US and Israelis are pressuring Iran to not have a nuclear weapon, do you think the new leader of Iran, Mujtaba Khamenei, would likely change his course and thrive to why not US is pushing to why not if US is pushing to have a uh, nuclear energy in Saudi Arabia, then why not we can have that? Why Israel has the nuclear weapons but the world doesn't talk about them, then why we don't have that nuclear weapon? So it's is it just about nuclear, or is it just more things that the US and Israelis um, um, are just using this rhetoric to uh, go beyond the red lines?
I'm saying the Iranians are begging for a deal. I think this has, I don't know how many times he has said it, but there's dozens of times that he said it. So you would think in a normal Western professional journalism, a journalist would go back to Iran and ask Iran how far, and the Iranians have their media. They never beg for anything. Iranians are not beggars; they are fighters. So if Trump tells all these things, he's talking to his audience, making clear to his audience that, look, the bombing didn't work. But he can't say the bombing didn't work, so he said the Iranians are begging. But the problem is, you don't see any Iranian begging, and you don't see any response. So, how many times can you repeat the stupidness? You know. But if you control the media, as the powers do in the United States and the world, if you control the media, they don't ask you these questions. Oh, but you said this yesterday and the day before and the day before. Where are we? Those questions should have been put. Then the second thing is the nuclear issue. You have to understand. There's obviously this thing that you mentioned. Why can Israel have 19 nuclear bomb, and who are other people to tell Iran what they should or should not do? You know. But there was a fatwa in Iran against the use of nuclear weapons. In the war, in the first Iran Iraq war, Khomeini prohibited the use of chemical weapons. They could have done it. So, why is this there? Because the military doctrine of Iran is based on religious values. And the atomic bomb would indiscriminately kill innocent people. So that was the basis for the fatwa, saying that if we use this bomb, mind you, there are many people in Iran saying we need a bomb. Many people in Iran would think that the bomb would prevent any future attack on Iran. And they might be right about it. But then it will go against the fatwa. So maybe the fatwa will change, but I think the military defense of Iran was not based on a nuclear bomb. It was based on two things, three things. One was drones and ballistic missiles. So that is, let's say, the weaponry. The second was the underground cities, because they know they would be bombed from the air. So they had to build, in the course of decades, not in the course of a few years, a whole underground structure, infrastructure, where they produce these weapons and from where they could launch these weapons. And the third was the unity of the people, you know. And you could see that in Khamenei, who people would say, yeah, he's a hardliner, but he really tried to get reformists and principalists to work together, keep the unity of Iran. So these are the three pillars of the defense strategy of Iran. Now, the thing of a nuclear weapon, as I mentioned, they have a kind of virtual nuclear weapon, which is the bombing of the nuclear reactor in Dimona in Israel. You know, so and the other thing is, suppose you put a bomb in Qatar. Think about it. What the effects would be in the region. So it doesn't make sense militarily to have for Iran to have nuclear bombs. It doesn't make sense. It makes sense in the terms of deterrence, but not in the terms of winning a war. But to get the US out of Western Asia, you need to bomb their military infrastructure. You don't do that with nuclear bombs. So it makes perfectly sense for the Iranians to focus on their interballistic capacity and their drone capacity to wipe out the American military base, which basically has been going on now for weeks. Um, the nuclear issue is the second issue. So for the Iranians, it is easy to say, "Oh, you want kind of paper victory that we sign a document that we won't have a nuclear weapon." We have signed it a dozen times. We could cite it another time. Again, doesn't matter. But this is for consumption in the United States. But militarily, it doesn't mean anything.
So I remember Iranian leader Ali Khamenei gave a speech in an event after Trump, illegally invaded Venezuela. That time, the U.S. military were getting up their equipments into the Middle East, West Asia, and that time he said that Iran can, hit the ships so hard that it can go down deep in the ocean. And there we saw big banners of ships being bombed in Iran in the squares. And but now we see most of the Iranian navy is gone. It's under the sea. But what I want to just bring up here is like why is Iran and its its military decision maker are not going after the U.S. Navy and uh, uh, I mean I think they can hit them and uh, they can basically that could go deep into the ocean. But why are they having I mean, keeping that kind of control while giving their response with any attack? And if that comes if there comes a situation where Iranians uh, decide to attack the navies and navy military equipments of US on the water, then what what escalation would it bring? Yeah.
All right. So at some point in time, the video stopped. So I didn't get your question. Where
Okay. My question was like, if Iranians can attack the navy of U.S. military navy in the region, so why haven't they did that yet? And if they do that, uh, what what escalation would the region see? Because that will be a massive risk and yeah.
All right. I think it's important to, and many people would wonder why do they bomb these tankers that do the close the Strait of Hormuz? Why don't they attack? Bomb flatten Israel, kill thousands of Israelis. Why don't they kill all these American? Go after the personnel and so. Um, I think if you want to understand Iranian strategy, as I understand from what reading and looking and talking to Iranians who explain things to me, um, then the first thing you have to understand is that the Iranians are not acting out of emotional considerations. They're acting out of religious consideration and based on uh, their moral values underlying. They would never would bomb a children's school like the Americans have done. It would, certainly not on purpose. So attacking civilians just for killing civilians is not part of the military doctrine. So the military doctrine is, mind you, based on destroying the American infrastructure. The ships that block the Strait of Human are not the infrastructure. The infrastructure are the military bases. The ships can move away in a few hours, but infrastructure can't move away in a few hours. And the infrastructure are radar, are cognitive, satellites, data receivers, are the hangars where the planes are that are doing the bombing. So they have thousands of objects that they could bomb that weakens the military infrastructure of the US. So when the Strait of Hormuz is closed, who is suffering the most of it? It's the West, not Iran, you see. But Iran can export its oil, through other means. Obviously, more difficult, but they can deliver the oil in certain ways to China and in the region, and that's why they want a land blockade now. You see, they try to figure out if they could do a land blockade. So, despite the economic hardships, the military value of bombing the base in Jordan is much higher than bombing the ship in the Strait of Hormuz. That's my take of it, you know. And the other thing is managing the escalation ladder, meaning you just don't bomb out of, then you've killed maybe 5,000 Americans there. If you bring down the ship, they can do it, but the question is, when would you do it? When would it come? When is the moment to do things like this? In this time, the moment is that you are telling the GCC countries, the powers in the region, look, we are not there to destroy just anything. We are also thinking after the war. If this stops, where do we go with each other? And I think just indiscriminately bombing and pleasing people's emotion is not part of how you manage an escalation ladder. You manage an escalation ladder by looking at how other parties in the region and partners react to what you're doing. You see?
So recently we saw Ukrainian drone attack on Iranian vessel in Caspian Sea. Uh, I mean, few years ago, even recently, nobody thought about this could happen uh, in that waterways where it's almost a private kind of sea between Russia, Iran, and Azerbaijan. So Ukraine blamed that it was Iranian weapons transferred to Russia, and it was later mm, said by Iranian officials that it won't go unanswered. Uh, so how do you see, like, if Ukraine does attack another vessel of Iranian into the Caspian Sea, and what type of retaliation would Iran prefer over that escalation? Or even they say we have the right to answer for the attack already they did. What would they go for the Ukrainians? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think first we have to understand the question of why do the Ukrainians are doing this? Why? I mean, they are fighting Russia. Why are they going to attack a ship of Iran? And the answer is clear. They think that if they link the Ukrainian war with the war in Iran, then the Americans would be stronger supporter of the war in Ukraine. There's no military value in attacking a Iranian ship in the Caspian Sea because it doesn't hurt the Iranian military. It hurts the family of the people they kill. It hurts the economics people who own the economics of the ships, but it has no military value. So the only value is to get the Americans in a stronger support of you in Ukraine. Now, how do the Iranians determine when and how to attack and bomb and send bombs? It's not just a thing of you bomb me and I'll bomb you. That's not the logic. The logic is, again, what does this mean from our overall war strategy? You see, they could retaliate and say, okay, make sure that this is not a regular thing, because then we'll cooperate with the Russians in attacking you more, heavier. But basically, these kind of things doesn't figure highly, in my view, on the Iranian response. They might respond, but it's not part of the overall plan of getting the US military base out of Western Asia. That is what determines the strategy.
Okay. There were also reports that on behalf of Iran, Russia might take action against Ukraine for that attack. And apart from that, we also have a new report that a recent strike on Ukraine was was through a North Korean made missile. And we also know that Russia is preparing for something big, like mobilizing 500,000 soldiers, recruiting 500,000 soldiers to join this war on Ukraine, and in that, more 50,000 North Korean soldiers will be joining that war. So, uh, as we know that this war in Ukraine started with uh, what Russia always said to the NATO and the Western countries, that they don't want uh, any mass or any weapons or NATO presence on their border. And now we see Ukraine getting all of the NATO's weapons. Recently, it got the license to build their missiles from US. So the thing is exactly what Russia don't want to happen. Russia didn't want to happen in Ukraine, and it's happening at a much larger scale. Now Ukraine can strike thousands of kilometers and hit huge um, Russian energy infrastructures. We see their uh, their companies which are similar like Amazon being hit, and uh, yeah, I think the escalation is what we are seeing forward. But uh, in your view, like how Russia is absorbing this loss, and while they do have an escalation, I mean they do attack Ukraine on almost daily basis, but as Ukrainian escalate with the drone strike and hitting the infrastructure, we see long lines on petrol and gas stations. So how long will it go to to uh, have a diplomatic solution to this war, or maybe there could be something deal uh, either, but we don't see that any sign of happening on that ground. Or if that's not happening, then how do you see the escalation going forward? We know that recently a Russian missile fell into Poland, and Poland scrambled its fighter jets, and the eastern flank is already preparing for a potential Russian invasion. So these events are quite, you know, I can say dangerous, because if more uh, countries get involved, then I guess it gets more complicated to solve that uh, war. So yeah, just how would you see that event happening over that region?
Okay. Um, let's take the first a general thing that Putin thought that with the election of Trump, there would be a diplomatic solution of the war. He was wrong. But he really thought that. When they had this meeting in Anchorage, he was optimistic. And I was at the Valdai meeting in Russia last September. Putin was there explaining, his view of Trump. And generally, the Russian, they thought it was possible to make a deal with Trump. Because the war in Ukraine is not a war between Ukraine and Russia. It's a war between NATO and Russia. So the whole military infrastructure, the data collection, the intelligence, the personnel, even operating complex defense systems, these are NATO, not Ukraine. So I think that the Russians have understood that Trump can deliver. So despite all his contradictory things, first he wouldn't give weapons to Ukraine, he would stop the funding. All these things didn't happen. So I think the Russians have made a conclusion: we're going to end this militarily, and that is what you're going to see coming weeks. Mind you, the Russians have taken already large pieces of land, in eastern Ukraine, where the majority of the population is Russian speaking. That is already there, and they are, preparing that to integrate them into the Russian state. So yes, I think that Putin has concluded that Trump will not be able to deliver, and only a military solution will bring the final solution. So that's why I think in the coming weeks you'll see bigger military operations. The second thing is the Russia China had some kind of ambivalent relation with the US, saying that they were always hoping that the US would come to their senses, and therefore, they should try to reason with the US and try to get a deal with the US. And in that process, Iran was hanging in limbo, meaning what are they going to do with Iran? Because while Iran was attacking, Russia, the US was attacking Iran, how would that interfere with their efforts to come to terms with Trump? And I think now the conclusion is if the US loses the war with Iran, it will benefit Russia and China. So I think that that's what you are seeing. Mind you, that there have been joint military uh, exercises between the military of Iran, Russia, and China before. That's been going on for a few years. So I think that they might reach a conclusion near where even China and Russia might agree with Iran that the solution in breaking American power is not talks, but military action. And in Ukraine, it means an offensive, and in Western Asia, it means the bombing of the whole American infrastructure there. And that's what we're seeing now.
So if we see more escalation in that region, like Russia escalate with uh, uh, taking over all of the Ukraine, so do you think the rest of the NATO countries uh, will simply agree with that? I mean, it's okay if you take the Ukraine, we will we will just stay out of it. Uh, but still, we see the NATO chief Mark Rutte warning Russia that any inch of NATO territory will be with a great response uh, to the Russians. Uh, do you think in coming future will the world see a direct confrontation between uh, NATO and Russia? As we speak, the war in Ukraine uh, is going on. The Russians are also uh, taking a lot of huge blows on their infrastructure and other uh, economic aspects. But uh, in terms of whole of the NATO, uh, would they go first to defend, or would they wait for any Russian action to start with that, uh, what we could possibly see?
Okay, look, the Russians have made it clear they are ready for a confrontation with NATO. So they've made it clear times and again that if NATO attack, NATO is attacking through Ukraine, but if they would dare, let's say, go further, uh, that Russia would be prepared bombing The Hague, Amsterdam, Paris, London, Bonn, Berlin. Um, so Russian people from different top echelon cadres have made it clear that Russia is not afraid of a military confrontation with NATO, and yet it's even worse, it's preparing for it, you know. And when I was writing this book on decolonizing the mind, I went into the whole thing of nuclear war. What, how was the nuclear war look like? You know, trying to read a bit about it, and I came across something which baffled me. That was that there was this strategy in the West of the first decapitation strike, meaning Russia has 6,000 nuclear weapons, the United States 5,500. And the idea was that in one strike, you take out the whole US Russian leadership with atomic bombs. And then appeared that the leadership has developed a kind of system, they call it, I think, the dead hand, where if they are not there, automatic systems launches all these thousands of nuclear bombs to all the different cities. It's a nightmare scenario, you know. So I think the NATO is playing with fire, nuclear fire. It's very dangerous if they go there. And we see the step by step escalation, but the population in Europe, the population in the United States is against war. The closer we come there, the closer we come to a situation where the people in these countries will take to the millions to the street, bring down governments if this goes on. It's not just a military thing, it's also a political explosion which is behind it.
We recently saw like France taking the lead about uh, providing nuclear weapons to non-nuclear uh, countries inside NATO to basically just confront Russians. And with with that context, like obviously nuclear weapon is the last I can say weapon that would be deployed to any other. But deploying a nuclear weapon to another non-nuclear country changes the status quo, and it does gives a sign to the Russians or uh, beyond that um, the escalation could be coming from any side. So it won't be France is providing nuclear weapons, but uh, any of that country could lead that strike for for defending it. But beyond reaching to, I mean, directly having confrontation between Russia and US, I think it would first would start between NATO and uh, Russia. And as we see those uh, politicians in Europe, in those NATO countries, uh, meeting in every several months, uh, getting Ukraine more funds into that, into the developing more weapons, and obviously this is not what Russia wants to see. But if this goes on, if this continues for some more time, and we see Ukraine striking more deeper inside Russia, and more NATO support to Ukraine in terms of weapon intelligence, and so where where could this uh, this current stage would lead us to, in next uh, 3 to 5 years, uh, based on the what uh, we are seeing the rhetoric from the leaders of Western, I mean NATO countries.
3 to 5 years. I'm looking at 3 to 5 months because we are in a situation now. The Russians have their strategy and plan very clear. If they are attacked by NATO countries directly, they will confront the NATO countries directly. If they are being attacked now indirectly, then they confront the means for indirect confrontation, which is Ukraine, but it might extend beyond that. Meaning that, if, let's say, a nuclear weapon is stationed in Ukraine, that would be a red line for the Russian to go all out, you see. So I think in the coming weeks, not years, in the coming weeks, we'll see Russia taking initiative to militarily end this conflict with a military defeat of NATO. And NATO have then to decide whether they accept the defeat or wants to push further for military confrontation. And I think that is what we're going to see the coming weeks because the preparations are already there, as you mentioned. The mobilization of people, the infrastructure that's being built for the direct confrontation. You see now more and more Russian bombing Kiev and bombing things that they didn't do. So they won't take up this constant drone attacks from Ukraine very long anymore.
So when we know like Iran is providing at the beginning of the Ukrainian invasion by Russian with the drones, Shahid drones to Russia. Later, Russia claimed they are producing their own Geran drones, and now we see Ukraine leading that drone warfare. But one thing to mention was just about the weapons. Like Russia has a weapon called Orsnik, which is believed to that no uh, defense system in the planet on the planet can stop that weapon, and it is tested in Ukraine war. So we heard like there was kind of official statement by some of Russian official that if the NATO countries or US provides weapons to Ukraine, then why would we not provide our weapons to our strategic partners? So, do you think Russia could provide that kind of high potential weapons uh, to Iran or its any strategic partner like China, North Korea? Because these weapons can be launched with a nuclear warhead, and it could easily reach um, any part of the world. And if 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 that happens, can you hear me, Sandu? I just lost your.
Yeah, I saw that the connection was lost, but I got a guess of your question. Yeah, well, uh, as I mentioned in the beginning, Russia, China, and Iran are leading the struggle for the breaking of the US hegemonic power in the world. They are leading it. And all the things you mentioned are incidents in that bigger picture. So the whole question is how to manage the escalation ladder in Ukraine and in Western Asia. So the Russians thought that they had a deal with Trump, you know, in Anchorage. They thought that, yeah, they could set a timetable in which uh, uh, they would force Zelensky to sign a deal with Russia. It turned out that Trump is not strong enough against the military industrial complex in the United States, which is funding his party, which is funding many of his supporters in the Congress. So my guess is the Russian concluded that it will go nowhere with Trump. You know, so how do you manage then the escalation ladder in Ukraine? You don't just go on and bomb. You could indiscriminately bomb everything, but whatever you do, you also to think about the question of what will happen after the war, right? So I think that the Ukrainians have lost, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of lives. If the war ends, Zelensky ends because he won't will not be re-elected. There will be another kind of thing. So even if you win militarily by bombing the cities, etc., there will be a point in time where you have to sit with those we are bombing to say, okay, let's stop now and let's have a peace agreement and let's stop. So when you fight a war, you always have to think about peace. So that's why it's not like two people fighting and one shoot the other and the other is dead and everything. It's not that with countries. So people in military and political power uh, have to think about this. Look what the Iranians have said. The Iranians have, when we won the war, and they declared that they have won the war, by the way, but the war is still going on, they will get reparations from the Gulf countries. They put it flatly there. We're going to rebuild our country, but you have to pay for it. So I think in the case of Ukraine, we are entering the phase of the final, is my guess, of a kind of final military confrontation where the Russia a military pressure on Ukraine to sign ultimately a document of surrender.
Okay. Uh, my next question was about Pakistan. Like Pakistan sits between South Asia, Central Asia, very close to China and Russia and the Middle East powers. Um, as we also know, China-Pakistan economic corridor continues. How important do you think Pakistan will become uh, in 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 the changing global balance, and uh, uh, what kind of impact it will bring into the region?
I think the role of Pakistan is small. They might want to exaggerate it, that they're playing a very big role, but the role of Pakistan primarily has been to mediate to get this MOU done. And the Pakistanis, the Iranians were very clever to bring the Pakistanis on their side of supporting the MOU. But don't not forget, Pakistan military has been trained by the US. Pakistan military is being paid by the US. So many within the Pakistan military who are looking after the US interests. But China is economically very much involved in Pakistan. So there's a partnership there. Pakistan has nuclear bombs and has an agreement with Saudi Arabia, which isn't put into effect because Iran is bombing Saudi Arabia and Pakistan is doing nothing while there's a defense agreement there. you know. So there's a lot of paper tigers floating around in these countries. A lot of things on paper that doesn't work, like the whole thing of Hamas and the peace board. It's a paper tiger, you know. A lot of things on paper, but nothing happens on the ground. So I guess the role of Pakistan will be limited in the mediation between the United States and Iran. Um, Beyond that, I don't see them playing a very big role in region. The only thing I see probably is that they might play a role in a new security arrangement for the region as a whole once the US is gone. That might be something, you know. But yeah, that would be a possibility for them to get engaged. But
Just
for now, it's just a mediation thing, like Qatar. Qatar is also mediating, you know. Um but the real power that determines the future of the region is Iran, China, and Russia. That
okay.
determines
Do you,
how the Western
do you
world will
think
look like.
okay? Do you think Pakistan is capable to fill the gap of that security arrangement in the region? Obviously, it is indirectly supported by China and Russia, but independently, is it capable of doing that?
I think the leading force in the security arrangement will be Iran and Turkey. Turkey might play an important role. Remember, Turkey is a member of NATO. Turkey, Erdogan has a good relations with Trump, but Erdogan and Netanyahu are in contramine. Although Turkey is supporting Israel with oil, there's a hypocrisy there of Erdogan. Um, but I think the security arrangement which might come will center around the question of if the United States is gone, how do we ensure that we don't attack each other militarily? But then the second dimension is what do we do with Israel? What if Israel attacks Lebanon again? Uh, the genocide in Gaza, etc. So I think these will be important questions there. And again, as I said, Pakistan might play a role in it. Turkey might play a role in it, which is also a big military power in the region. Um, but ultimately, Iran will be leading the whole thing because what Iran wants after the military is gone, that will be a big thing for all the regional partners. What is Iran game plan after the war?
Okay. Um, when we see beyond China, sorry, Russia, Ukraine, and in the Middle East, we know there is another front between China and Taiwan, and possibly that could also include uh, Japan and Philippines. We saw recent escalation in the rhetoric of Japanese new prime minister about its arms sales and imports. We are seeing also a pending. Uh, I guess it's not pending, but the U.S. arms sales to Taiwan that China is very opposing, and it might cross the line. And recently we are seeing military exercise in the sea, Chinese waters, and the foreign ministry giving um, some kind of signs that there could be uh, a potential invasion of Taiwan in coming years. So if that happens in that part of region, like China goes to take over Taiwan militarily, uh, what what implications, I mean, what impact would it create in that region, given that US military presence is already in Japan and other neighboring countries? Can you please unmute yourself? I think,
Yes. Hello?
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now it's good.
All right.
Almost I
Okay.
lost you.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you want me to repeat the question, or
No,
did
no,
you get the
I
context?
got it. So many analysts in the United States see the biggest confrontation in the world in the coming decades, not as between Russia and the US, not between Iran and the US, but between China and the US. Many of them are talking is first of all, economically, there's this big economic competition, but economics tied with technology. The race is who is going to lead in technology. Is it China or is it the US? And it's clear that China is winning that race, you know, and India is not close enough there to see what China has in technological advances, both on the deep scientific research, aerospace, you know, on all kind of level. China is very advanced. So, in order to stop that economic rise, the United States thinks that a military confrontation with China would stop that rise. And the Taiwan issue is a issue that can lead to military confrontation. And the Chinese have made it clear that province that will unite with China mainland by peaceful mean and if necessary by non-peaceful mean. So even the Chinese are ready for military confrontation with the US. But the war in Iran and the war in Ukraine will decide whether the US military has an appetite for another war if they lose in this region. If they win, they're emboldened to take on China, because then it's not 7 countries in 7 years, but 3 countries in the coming years. They are losing in Ukraine, they are losing in Iran, but they hope to win there. And if they would have won there, the next stage would be China. But if they lose there, I think they will lose the appetite for uh, confronting China militarily.
Yeah, we know, like, what we are seeing from the events happening in the region, that US is not going what it was planned to, and confronting a big power like China is uh, where something surprisingly a lot of uh, other things will come up that time. But let's see what happens. Um, I think we could uh, end this with the last question that I have. Basically, you know, what uh, what lessons should the younger generation around the world specifically take from this geopolitical challenges happening? And in your perspective, uh, um, what what should be their uh, view uh, overall into this events?
The first one is move from trying to understand incidents to trying to understand processes. If you focus on incident, you won't understand the process. If you want to focus on the process, ask yourselves, where are we coming from and where are we going? We are coming from an era in which the US empire is in decline. And they thought that in Western Asia, that decline could be stopped with the military bases, the Abraham Accords with Israel has gone nowhere, and the genocide and the resulting genocide in Gaza, the bombing of Lebanon, and now the war in Iran is the last resort. You understand that as a process. So you understand that don't think about all these stupid things Trump is saying. We won the war, we eradicated the navy. There was no real navy in Iran. Iran has underground naval bases, but they don't have a navy. They don't have an air force. They have some planes, they have some navy, but that is not their defense is never based on that. That's why they can keep bombing the U.S. military installation. They didn't need airplanes and navy for it. They needed ballistic missiles and the drones. So try to understand the process. And the second thing is don't trust the 8 o'clock news. The 8 o'clock news are different for 8 o'clock lies. They are telling you lies all the time. And if you listen to these lies, you won't understand what's happening. If you listen to these lies, there would have been regime change in Iran a long time ago because all the population of Iran was against the government and against the system. And it didn't happen. So if you watch the Western media, you wouldn't understand why did it not happen. While they were telling you it's going to happen every minute. And that they have been telling you for 40 years. Every minute there will be an uprising, imminent uprising that brings down government and the Islamic system. So uh, try to understand the process, try to go beyond the Western media and look into the media of those countries. Look at TASS news or the speeches of Putin or Al Maidin. Look what the Iranians themselves are saying. Follow also their media and don't be limited to Western media.
Okay. We have a comment. I'll see. So there's a person, Suhas Kadam, is asking, do you think Arabs have any other choice rather than US protection?
In peace with Iraq, get rid of the military bases, struck a peace agreement with Iran, build the economies of the region, and forget the military bases. It's a simple thing.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sandew. I think we should wrap up, and we are sincerely thank you
Thank
uh,
you.
for sharing your time, your knowledge, your unique perspective uh, on on our conversation. And we want to thank you everyone who joined, and I hope you guys enjoyed our conversation. Feel free to go through the description and see Sandew's website and his YouTube channel as well. And yeah, we will see you guys next time. And thank you for watching us. Yeah,
Thank you again for us. Okay.
bye.
Bye.